Hiya, teacher friends and learner friends, because today I'm going to talk about teaching on iTalki from a learner's perspective. So, before we jump into things, I have taught about 650 lessons in English, of course, on iTalki, and I've recently begun learning on iTalki as well, learning French. So today I'm going to give you 10 tips for any teachers, no matter what language you're teaching or learning or hoping to teach, and what is a good thing to be wary and mindful of in your first lesson. I have taken about 40 lessons so far from about 20 different teachers, and that's not because I'm picky. It's because I've had to find enough availability. Of course, when teachers start off, their rate is very cheap. They have a lot of availability. This is very attractive to new students. So if you don't catch them early enough, then you find that you book one class, and once that class is over, they're completely booked for the rest of the week. So because of that, I've learned with a lot of different teachers. I've seen a lot of different styles. And before we jump into things, I'd like to preface this by saying that there's no right way to teach or singular right way to learn on iTalki, especially a platform as diverse as this. But I just want to share some things that have worked for me, and I think it's good to at least be mindful of this, because from my experience as a teacher and a learner, these are commonly held with other people. But as we go through, I want you to take this with a pinch of salt, so that you know that if you don't do this in the specific way I'm talking about, or if you do some of these naysays that I'm talking about as well, it could work for certain students. And all of this lies on making sure you know your students. All right, so these are 10 tips for iTalki teachers in their first class from a student's perspective. Okay, so number one, the most important thing is just building a stable connection with your student, direct line of communication, and that is message in advance. Of the 15, 20 teachers that I've learned with, only about 5 or 6 of them have messaged me in advance. That is a lot more, a lot stronger than you might think as a teacher. It takes you a second to just copy and paste a message to your student to be. It's a really good way to let your student just know a little bit about your personality. For me as a teacher, I don't put much, and my teachers have messaged me all different types of intro messages, I guess you could call them. Some of them have given very useful information, some of them not that useful, but specifically the fact that they are trying to establish some communication. Hey, my name's Ryan, nice to meet you, I'm excited for our class. Let me know if you have any suggestions, anything you want to talk about. That's a good start, okay? It shows that you care. Number 2, I ran into this a couple classes ago. This is making age-appropriate content. Okay, so I had this student, this teacher, who actually sent me some videos and some materials that are more geared towards kids than they are towards adults. And this is a rookie mistake. This is completely, I'm sure they didn't mean anything bad by it, but there's plenty of information on the internet. There's plenty of resources that are geared towards all different levels, but more importantly, all different age groups. Luckily, I'm a pretty understanding guy because I've been there before, but just to nip it in the bud before it becomes a problem, get used to being mindful of different age groups. Because if you're giving child material to adult learners, especially from certain cultures, that could look kind of bad. So just make sure you do some background. This is discretionary, but it's quite clear to be able to see what is appropriate for a certain age group and what is inappropriate. All right. Number 3, being on time. Your timing, just be on time for your first class. Like, honestly, we're not all angels, we're not all saints. I've been late for some classes, okay? But I've never been late for a first class. And if I have ever been late for even one of the first classes, I've told them in advance. I had a teacher who was late by a few minutes, but he kind of gave me a hint, half an hour or an hour in advance, which is a good thing as well. So if you're going to be late, just give them a little heads up in advance, because when they say that there's a 5 minute break on iTalki, that doesn't mean the first 5 minutes. And if it does mean the first 5 minutes for you, at least just let your student know that in advance. Otherwise, it seems like you're irresponsible and that you showed up late, which you did. Okay, number 4 is correction frequency. And this is where we're going to really get into the nitty-gritty between the students like me and just other students, right? Because for me, I find that I've built better rapport and had more constructive and positive classes when I've been able to speak for a little amount of time, maybe for the first 20 minutes, for the first 30 minutes, with a low amount of corrections, right? Definitely correct your students. Correct them enough to let them know that you are listening, right? And that you care, and to let them know how you correct them. But don't overcorrect, because if you overcorrect, that could hurt a student's confidence, and that could also just take the wind out of their sails. So for me, the first time my students make a mistake in the first class, first of all, this depends on the level as well. Like, I'm A2 for French, but if you're teaching a C1 or a C2 level student, yeah, it might be okay to correct them every edge you see. But I think that if you're teaching a lower level student, it's important for you to catch the first correction, write down the correction or just verbalize it to them, and let them know, I'm going to just give you a few corrections along the way. Is that okay with you? That's what I do, and I find that it's been very good with my students, because some of them use that opportunity to tell me what they need to work on as well. So you could kind of skip the small chat, which some students want to do, and just cut to the chase and start working on different things that they need to work on. Some students don't just want the conversation. Some students actually really want to get in there and work on grammar or whatnot. For me, I like the conversation, but I also don't like to be corrected too much in the first class, okay? And after the first class, then it's free game. It's a free for all. Okay, number 5, this kind of goes with the last one, with number 4. This is switching languages, all right? So there's a thin line between helping a student and kind of showing off, right? And I think that if you're a bilingual teacher, you need to be very mindful of this. Again, different students have different philosophies and views on this, but for me, I go into my first class with the aspiration for as little English as possible. Wow, I can't even speak English. And even when my teachers message me in advance, if they message me in English, I message them back in French. I think even your initial message, maybe write it in both languages or something like that. Because this is a chance for them to be immersed in the actual culture and the language. I understand that sometimes you need to explain things in the other language, and this is fantastic for you to be able to do this and switch languages. But sometimes this is overused, and I think this is a habit of just being in multilingual or bilingual situations with your friends. But while you're talking to students, this could actually be a bad habit for you to get into, because then you could switch languages too much, to the point that your student isn't either thinks that their use of the language isn't good enough to use it, or they just start thinking in both languages, and for some students that doesn't work for them. Okay, so definitely watch how much you switch languages, and maybe just talk to your student about this at the get-go, and like establish a rule about how often you want to speak in the other languages. Establish a signal, I don't know, whatever works for you. Okay, number 6, this goes with the last one actually, and it's just to ask them if they understand. When a teacher asks me if I understand, if they ask me comprend, it's fantastic for me. I find that it's better than me awkwardly trying to ask them to repeat the question or whatnot. But never underestimate the power of learning to ask a person to repeat the question. That's one of the most important things that you need to know as an actual language learner. So for me, I think that some of the best opportunities I've been given for growth are patient teachers who kind of know that I didn't hear, but they let me wiggle my way through, try to find my way through to either try to answer the question, repose the question, reframe the question, or simply just say, I didn't hear your question, could you ask me again? But asking it if your student understands, that is a good thing as well. So just have a healthy balance between these two things, and for a student like me, that definitely works well, right? Number 7 is honesty. Okay, be honest about how you feel. If you're nervous as a teacher, then that's okay. If you feel uncomfortable about one thing or another thing as a teacher, that's okay as well. I was talking to one of my teachers, because of bad connection, we had to cut the camera. And she said, it's kind of weird talking to you without the camera on, right? And we just kind of chuckled about it. It was just funny. And for some people it's like that. It was like that for me. I've had some classes, my first few classes, where the camera would go off and I felt like I was in a dark room or something like that. So I could definitely see how that's awkward, and she just said it straight up, so that way I could kind of understand and comprehend a little bit of her hesitation at certain points, because she's kind of low-key saying, this is a little bit odd for me. No problem, right? So definitely be honest about that. And honestly, I find that some nervous teachers are better prepared teachers, and better prepared teachers are the ones that I want to book with in the future. Okay, number 8 is to come with material. I have booked with 15, 20 teachers. I've only had 2 teachers produce material in the first lesson. I rebooked with both of those teachers almost solely because they had material in the lesson. It was just an article, just as a way to test my level. I know that conversation is a way of testing your level as well, and some students are message in advance to say what they want to work on. So if they don't message, then the teacher feels, okay, I don't have to prepare material. I get that this happens across the board, but there's nothing wrong with just preparing 5 minutes some material, just to read an article, work on pronunciation, some sort of link, as long as the student has access to a link. For me, that has worked. That shows that the teacher is prepared. Number 9, and this is a big one right here, is a plan. I've had maybe 3 or 4 of my teachers tell me the plan right from the get-go. Right? Okay, so this is what we're going to do today. We're going to chat for 30 minutes, and then we're going to test your ability for the 30 minutes, right? Again, those teachers I booked another class with. I like that they established the plan at the beginning. Okay, and the last one, give me homework. Okay, give me homework. Give me a strategy. There's a teacher who I might not book a class with again, just because our personalities kind of clashed, but he taught me a very useful strategy, right? And for that reason, I might book another class with him, just because he taught me something. He gave me something to take home, right? That's an important thing. That's gold. So give your students something something that defines you as a teacher. Like, why should I book another class with you? You don't need to reinvent the wheel or anything like that, but especially if you're bilingual as well, give them a tip or a strategy, something for them to work on, instead of just a list of, verb conjugation or something like that, right? But as I said, material could work well as well. So just a quick rundown of our 10 tips right there, from a student to prospective teachers. Message in advance, make sure your material's age appropriate, be on time, Correction frequency, don't correct too much in the first class. Don't switch between languages too much unless if it's been established beforehand. Ask if your student understands, be honest with your student, bring some material to the class, establish a plan from the very get-go, and give some homework, and you are scot-free, you're home free. Okay, cool. So if you have any suggestions on what works either from a teacher's perspective or a student's perspective, leave it down in the box below. I really hope this helps you. I'm not trying to come for any teachers right here, but these are honest tips that come from an honest student/teacher right here. I have emphasized that this is specifically for your first class. Okay, so there'll be more videos in the future about your second and third and so on to infinity. But for your first class, these are the things to keep in mind. All right, so if you want weekly tips and tricks for ESL teachers and learners, then hit the subscribe button and hit the like button as well. Okay, I'm Ryan. Keep smiling.